So, what happens when you stop reaching out to a fearful avoidant attachment style? And I mean, in a couple of different places. After a breakup, even if you're the one dating the person and just feeling like you're always the one initiating plans or initiating conversation, when you take that step back, what takes place? Well, in today's video, we are going to uncover exactly that. And honestly, some of the parts here may really surprise you, both if you are the loved one of a fearful avoidant, but even if you are the fearful avoidant yourself listening, I think you'll start to gain some insight into your own inner world. And some of those things may be a little bit more shocking than you planned. So I want to take you through what a fearful avoidant actually feels and experiences when you stop communicating. But we're going to talk about the differences between if you take a small step back, like a half step back from communication, versus if you take a big step back, and what happens if you take a huge step back and sustain it. So not just like stop initiating and take a big step back, but actually like don't speak to the person much at all if you go completely quiet. And we'll talk about this in different contexts. We'll start by talking about it in a dating situation or friendship or just relationship in general. And then at the end, I'll take you through what about if it's after a breakup. So let's unpack this. Well, first and foremost, it can be really confusing to understand a fearful avoidant because a fearful avoidant attachment style really has these two sides or aspects to so much of their personality. They have this more anxious leaning side where they may fear abandonment, may fear losing connection in a relationship, and may hyper focus on trying to build that momentum with somebody. And yet they also have this fear of being trapped or engulfed or stuck in a relationship dynamic where their needs are not being met. And this can cause them to push away. But because those two parts of their personality are two parts that they often oscillate back and forth between, sometimes being in a relationship with a fearful avoidant can feel a little bit like you're in a pinball machine. You're sort of being bounced around everywhere from their really, hot side to their cold side and back to the warm side and back to the cold side. And, to be perfectly honest, this is because the fearful avoidant themselves is going through a lot of intense inner chaos in relationships, especially when they develop a real attachment to somebody. So as the relationship evolves and maybe you see that they started off on a great foot, maybe you are the fearful avoidant and you even notice within yourself that you tend to do really well in the dating stage of relationships. In that first, few weeks where you're just getting to know somebody, it's almost like you're in the relationship dynamic as your best version of yourself. You're there, you're present, but you don't have any of your fears that have really come online yet. Because one of the things that's very known about when our attachment style shows, or those patterns really show themselves or show up in our relationships, is that it happens when we've actually built an attachment to somebody. So in the first early weeks of getting to know somebody and dating them, you might feel like relationships are not turbulent or chaotic. It's only once you feel really vulnerable and you've started to truly build that kind of connection to somebody, that actual attachment, that a lot of those attachment wounds and fears will come online. So as the relationship progresses and you see that hot and cold behavior in yourself, or if you're the loved one watching this, about your fearful avoidant in your life, well, then what ends up taking place is that the fearful avoidance starts operating from like wanting closeness. But if they are getting engulfed or they feel like it's too much too soon, they will retreat and they will become afraid. And they'll keep people at a distance really as a measure for self-protection. They're scared of being too vulnerable because when they were vulnerable as children, they usually got deeply hurt. And so their subconscious mind associates, okay, being vulnerable again like this will lead me to be deeply hurt again. Now, of course, the fearful avoidant isn't usually consciously aware of this at the time. They'll go through relationships just wondering why they're so hard, or wondering why relationships are always a roller coaster, why they choose the wrong partner, or why there's so much chaos. But a lot of what's happening is as soon as that attachment bond is built, the chaos ensues and begins because all of those unresolved wounds from childhood come up and get projected onto the new primary attachment figure, who is your romantic partner in your adult life, and really replaces the primary attachment figure as the parent or parents from your childhood. So then what ends up happening is you may find that you're confused. If you're the loved one, if you're the fearful avoidant yourself, you may find that relationships have a lot of confusion. So if you then are the loved one of a fearful avoidant and you take a step back from them and you stop pursuing them and reaching out or initiating, what happens? Well, initially, the fearful avoidant may feel anxious. They may initiate themselves or try to make an effort, but we always talk about how when you're dating a fearful avoidant, or if you are the fearful avoidant and you are wondering about this, there's a sort of sweet spot when it comes to getting to know the fearful avoidant and progressing a connection with them. And that sweet spot is being not too cold and not too warm. It's almost like that Goldilocks zone. I once heard somebody refer to it as. And what that means is that you want to make sure that you're not pushing too much and coming in too close, because if you do, it's going to trigger their avoidance side and they're going to feel put off and afraid. But if you are too far away, they will feel rejected. And guess what happens when they feel rejected? They often also ultimately will deactivate, meaning that if they feel hurt enough by the rejection or feel like you're not trying enough, well, in small spurts, if you take a step back, like if you take a half step back, they may come towards you a lot. If you take too big of a step back, they are going to go, okay, you're rejecting me. You're going to hurt me. I need to protect myself now rather than later, and I need to reject you back. Now, this isn't them like trying to play a game or trying to get even. This is them usually trying to proactively prevent themselves from being deeply hurt or affected. And it often makes them feel like, okay, wait, can I really trust that this person cares? And they get afraid and they retreat. And, there's often this saying that fearful avoidance will push away, while a dismissive avoidant will pull away. So it's really the dismissive avoidant doing more of the retreating and the fearful avoidant doing more of the actively pushing away, maybe sometimes using harsh words or jumping to conclusions or saying, I don't need this anyways, or making a jab, actively pushing away from a place of hurt that they themselves are experiencing. I'm not excusing this behavior or saying it's okay, but it is important to recognize. And so then what happens if you keep that step back? Now, before I tell you this last important piece here of what happens if you keep that distance, you don't just take a big step back, but you actually maintain it. Before I tell you what happens, I do want to let you know that if you want to do a deeper dive into understanding your attachment style, or literally understanding any attachment style and what each attachment style needs for healing, there are attachment style healing courses you can check out fully for free for 14 days. We do this very rarely throughout the year, once or twice a year. We do a 14-day free trial to the whole of Personal Development School. It gives you more than enough time to get through those courses. And there's courses for like the handbook, the roadmap of understanding every other attachment style that's not yours and how they're going to operate in different stages and what they need to feel connected. But there's also all about your attachment style and how to heal it in the shortest period of time possible. So I'll put a link to those free resources down below. Now, if you don't just take a small step back, okay, so just so we're summarizing so far, a half step back, the fearful avoidant is going to get more anxious. They're going to try to come towards you and make an effort. Too big of a step back, they're going to feel rejected. They're actually going to deactivate and go in the opposite direction. A sustained big step back is when you'll usually see a fearful avoidant deactivate because they feel rejected. Then they may have sort of these spurts or moments across time, usually within the first 2-3 months after really not initiating much at all or talking much with this person at all. This is generally like after a breakup, where you may see them reach out indirectly and, have a conversation with you or ask how you're doing, or even ask things that are confusing, things about like your dating life or what's going on. And you're like, why are they asking me this? We're exes, and it can feel confusing. But this is them initiating a little bit of connection, hoping that you will come the other part of the way. And if you don't, they will stay in a place of deactivation. They will say, okay, you've hurt me. You've taken too big of a step back. I can't let my guard down enough to really initiate a real reconnection. And if a reconnection is to occur, they actually need somebody to show that they care, but basically prove it across time for at least another 6 to 8 weeks after starting to talk again, in order to feel like, okay, we can actually take steps towards maybe getting into a relationship again. It's almost like you're starting from scratch in the dating stage of relationships again, where you have to get to know the person, reestablish trust, reestablish the connection. And it's only through at least 6 to 8 weeks of doing that reconnecting that the fearful avoidant may reconsider being in a relationship and let their guard down enough to feel safe to do so. So I hope that gives you a tremendous amount of context. And if you have further questions about this, let me know down below. I'd love to hear your patterns of as a fearful avoidant attachment style, or the patterns that you see from your exes or people in your life, if you're the loved one of a fearful avoidant. And please put your questions down below, because I do take from them, answer them in future videos, all of that good stuff. And thank you so much for watching.